They sold it for less than it was worth. That's how it all began for Valentina Rosas, with a paper half signed and a stable nobody wanted. Welcome. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and comment from what part of Mexico or wherever you're watching from. The Aguirre Ranch had been closed for 3 years when the notary put it up for auction. It was a sunken property in southern Jalisco, in the ravine that descends from La Sierra toward the plain, where the north wind arrives without asking permission and the huizat grows between the stones, as if to remind the earth that it's still alive. The main stable had a collapsed roof on one side. The corral was full of dry mesquite. The water trough in the yard hadn't held water for 2 winters. Nobody wanted to buy that place. Nobody except a woman 7 months pregnant who arrived with a small wooden box under her arm and 400 pesos at the bottom of her sack. Valentina Rosas didn't arrive there out of bravery. She arrived because she had nowhere else to go. 4 months earlier, her husband Esteban Fuentes had left one Tuesday morning saying he was going to collect a payment in town. He never came back. What did come back 3 weeks later was a letter from her sister in Guadalajara. Esteban had been living with another woman since before Valentina had gotten pregnant. The letter contained no apology. Neither did her mother-in-law, Doña Refugio Fuentes, when Valentina went to find her at her adobe house with her hands on her belly and a look that still didn't understand. Doña Refugio received her at the gate and didn't let her in. She said in the flat voice of someone who had rehearsed the words, "Esteban was never yours. He never was, and that creature has nothing to do with this family either." None of those standing in the corridor intervened. 3 brothers-in-law watched from the shade of the eaves, and not one moved a foot. Valentina picked up the blue rebozo that had fallen to the ground, slowly placed it over her shoulders, and walked away down the dirt road without looking back. That night, she slept in the room rented to her by a woman in town, a windowless room with a torn blanket and a wobbly chair. She had 400 pesos, a blue rebozo inherited from her mother, a small wooden box with her identity papers, and a baby that kept growing inside her without asking anyone if it was a good time. She tried to stay in town. She went to ask for work at Don Macario's store. Don Macario looked her up and down and said shamelessly, "In your condition, you're no use, girl. Come back when you've given birth." She went to the mill. The mill woman told her they already had someone helping them. She went to the municipal office to ask if there was anything, any program, any aid. The clerk who attended to her searched through some papers for 5 minutes and then looked up. "There's nothing here for you." He said it without malice, which is the worst way to say it, because there wasn't even cruelty, only indifference. Valentina went out into the street with a vertical sun beating on the back of her neck and sat on a bench in the chapel's atrium. She stayed there without crying because tears also run out, and hers had run out days before. It was then that she saw the notice pinned to the post: property at auction, stable and land at La Sierra. Minimum price, 400 pesos. Valentina read it twice. She folded the paper, she put it in the wooden box, and the next day she went to the notary's office. The road to La Sierra was 8 kilometers of stony dirt track that the Jalisco sun made glint like knives. Valentina walked it with the sack on her shoulder and the blue rebozo tied around her waist, because her belly no longer let it hang straight. It took her more than 2 hours. Halfway there, she had to sit on a rock to rest. A cloud passed and gave her shade for exactly the time she needed to catch her breath. What she didn't know yet was that the road exhausting her was the same road that was going to save her. The stable looked worse in person than on paper. The sheet metal roof was bent and rusted. The corral door hung from a single nail. Inside, it smelled of wet earth, old firewood, and something that might have been hope if someone had tended to it in time. Valentina walked through the place slowly, with one hand on her belly. She touched the adobe walls. She stepped on the dirt floor. She stood under the fallen roof and looked up. Through the broken sheets came a strip of blue sky, clean, cloudless. It was the first beautiful thing she had seen in weeks. 3 days passed before Don Gilberto appeared. He was a man of about 70, thin as mesquite, with handmade leather sandals, and a hat that had seen more suns than any roof in the area. He arrived one morning unannounced with a bucket of warm milk and 2 clay gourds. He knocked on the gate with the handle of his machete and waited. Valentina peered out from inside with the old broom she had found in the corner. Don Gilberto looked at her without surprise. as if he already knew what he would find. "I'm the neighbor from the back plot," he said. "I brought milk. A stable without someone to work it falls down on its own. With someone inside, it holds up." He didn't ask how she had arrived. He didn't ask who the husband was. He just left the bucket at the gate and went away. The next day, he came back with a bag of beans and a bundle of dry firewood. The day after that, with 2 hens and a sack of corn. Valentina didn't ask him why. He didn't explain either. There was a code in those small acts that they both understood without needing words. One needed and the other could give, and that was reason enough. A week later, Don Gilberto arrived with an old mare tied with rope. The mare was thin, dark-coated, with a white spot on her muzzle that looked like fog stuck on. "Her name is Niebla," said Don Gilberto. "She can't carry weight anymore, but she knows the road to town by heart. If you need to go, she'll take you." Valentina extended her hand and Niebla sniffed her fingers for a long moment. Something in that gesture and the slow, calm sniff of the old mare made something in Valentina's chest loosen that had been clenched for weeks. She closed her eyes, then she understood something she had already suspected. She wasn't completely alone. She hung the blue rebozo on a nail on the stable wall next to the wooden box, beside where she slept. Every morning when she woke up, she saw it and remembered her mother, who was also a woman who hadn't had things easy, and who nevertheless had known how to make a home out of any cold room. Valentina began cleaning the stable meter by meter. She gathered up the loose dirt. She filled the holes in the walls with adobe mixed with straw. She repaired the corral door with rope and 2 straight sticks she found behind the granary. She put Don Gilberto's hens in a sheltered corner. She tied Niebla in the corral with water and corn. In the afternoons, when the sun went down and the temperature became bearable, she would walk slowly along the boundary of the land, with one hand on her belly and the other brushing the huizak, learning the edges of what was hers. It was during one of those walks that she found the well. It was at the back of the property, hidden between 2 large sabino trees, covered with boards and a rotten tarp. Valentina removed the boards carefully. She threw a stone in. The sound that came from below was clear, round, full. Water. There was water in that well, and nobody knew it, or everyone had forgotten. She ran to find Don Gilberto with all the speed her belly would allow. Don Gilberto arrived, looked inside, spat on the ground beside it, and said, "This well shouldn't be here." Valentina didn't understand. The old man bent down slowly, picked up some damp earth near the edge, squeezed it between his fingers. "The water comes from below, from an aquifer that crosses this whole property. The previous owner knew. That's why he covered the well." Valentina looked at him, still not understanding. Why did he cover it? Because if he had declared it, he would have had to register the water rights. And if he registered them, he could no longer sell the property for 400 pesos. But Don Gilberto didn't know that in the wooden box there was something that would change everything they thought they understood. That night, Valentina opened the wooden box for the first time since arriving at the stable. She took out her identity papers, the birth certificate, the auction document, and beneath all of them, folded in 4, was a document she didn't remember putting there. It was a yellowed paper with the seal of the Secretariat of Hydraulic Resources, dated 1974. She read it slowly, twice. It was a certificate of groundwater concession in the name of the property she had just bought, transferable to the legal owner of the land. A water right that had survived 50 years folded in a small box no one had opened. The next day, she went to the town notary with Don Gilberto. The notary reviewed the document for 20 minutes in silence. Then he called someone on the phone. He listened. He hung up. He looked up at Valentina. "This certificate is valid. The aquifer that crosses that property has an active concession that legally corresponds to the current owner." He paused. "Ma'am, you own the water." A week later, the Aguirre brothers arrived. There were 3. The eldest about 50 years old in a brown suit that fit him tight, the middle one with a felt hat and an unfriendly face, and the youngest who stayed silent the whole time but was the one who watched Valentina's hands the most. They arrived on horseback at midday, when the Jalisco sun fell vertically over the stable's yard. Valentina was hanging clothes on the line she had strung between 2 sabinos. She didn't move when she heard them arrive. The eldest spoke from atop his horse. "This property went to auction due to an administrative error. We have documents proving the land always belonged to our family. You're going to have to vacate." Don Gilberto was sitting on a stone near the well. He didn't get up. He just said, without raising his voice, "Administrative errors are corrected at the notary's office, not in someone else's yard. And if you bring documents, let the notary review them." He already reviewed hers. The eldest brother got off his horse. He took 2 steps toward Valentina. He told her, looking at her belly, "A woman alone can't handle land with a water concession. That's worth money. Sign the transfer, and we'll pay you what you spent." Valentina finished hanging the shirt she had in her hands. She turned toward the man. She spoke without raising her voice, with her back straight and her hands still. "I didn't buy this land to sell it. I bought it to live on, and the water is mine because the paper says so, and the notary certifies it. If you have something to argue, do it at the notary's office. There's nothing to discuss here." The eldest brother opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Don Gilberto. The old man looked back without blinking. He looked at the youngest brother, who was still silent but had stopped watching Valentina's hands and was now looking at the well. The 3 mounted their horses. The eldest said something between his teeth that the wind carried away, and they went off down the dirt road without looking back. Don Gilberto got up from his stone, picked up a little twig from the ground, threw it into the well. "People who want what's yours," he said slowly, "never come with the truth. They come with false documents and loud voices. When they come like that, they already know they've lost." The old man was right. That same afternoon, 3 neighbors from the area who had seen the Aguirres arrive stopped by the stable to ask if Valentina was all right. The people had seen, the people talked, and what they said was that a lone woman had bought a sunken piece of land, had found water, and had sent 3 men back the way they came without raising her voice a single time. When spring came, the stable was no longer a stable. It was a home. The adobe walls were clean and whitewashed. The corral door hung firm and opened without creaking. In the yard, there was a garden of beans, corn, chayotes, and in the sunniest corner, 3 orange saplings that Don Gilberto had brought from his plot wrapped in wet patate. The well was clean and working. Niebla grazed at the edge of the property with the white spot on her muzzle shining against the morning sun. And inside, in a new wooden cradle that the town notary had sent as a gift, slept a 3-month-old girl whom Valentina had baptized with her mother's name, Remedios. The blue rebozo now hung above the cradle, not on a nail on the wall, but on the wooden arch that Don Gilberto had carved by hand during the weeks the cold lasted. The wooden box was on the highest shelf, with the papers inside, the water certificate first, and on top of everything, a drawing someone from town had made for Valentina in charcoal on a piece of paper, her, Niebla, and Don Gilberto, standing next to the open well. One afternoon, while Valentina was feeding the chickens and listening to Remedios asleep inside, Don Gilberto arrived with his bucket and his usual hat. He sat down on a stone. He looked at the garden. He looked at the well. He looked at Niebla. "You went and bought dust from nobody," he said. And it turned out the dust had water. Valentina looked at him. "And neighbors," she said. The old man nodded once. He got up, left the bucket near the trough, and walked slowly down the dirt road toward his plot, the same as always, without making noise. Sometimes the most desperate moments are not the end of anything. They are the beginning of the only thing that truly belongs to us, the place we earn with our hands, with our back, with the dignity that no one could take from us even though they tried. Valentina didn't arrive at that stable by luck. She arrived because it was the only place the world left her, and she turned it into the only place she needed. Has an unexpected door ever opened when all the ones you knew had closed? If this story touched something in your heart, leave your comment below and tell us from what part of Mexico or wherever you watch these stories from. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any tale. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that the worst beginnings are sometimes the root of the best home. Until the next story, Remedios grew up knowing that her cradle had been a stable. And when someone asked her where she was from, she always answered the same thing in the clear voice of someone who knows exactly what she is saying. "I am from where the land wanted me."